Hello everyone. How is it going? I hope everyone is doing well. I'm streaming into Instagram. I'm streaming into YouTube. So I've got the double screen going on. I'm just going to double check my YouTube stream right now and just make sure. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I can see the chat. Okay, so if this is your first time joining me, I'm Kendra Perry. I'm an online business mentor for health and wellness coaches and practitioners. And my goal is to help new coaches, people who are relatively brand new, either they're fresh out of the gates or maybe a couple years into their business, but shit's just not working. My goal is to help you start and grow your business to 6 figures. Okay. So in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about branding. Okay. Because branding is a kind of a complex, let me just get the sound off there. It's a really complex thing to understand. And it actually took me personally in branding, but branding when it comes to selling online is incredibly critical. Okay. And any person that you follow online who you really love, you really relate with, you really connect with, I guarantee that they have a very strategic and intentional brand that is in place. Okay. So first off, let's talk about what a brand actually is. And then I'll talk about the things that you want to keep in mind when developing your brand. So these intentional pieces that you want to consider and bring into your online presence. Okay. So the best way that I can describe branding is essentially like what people say about you when you're not in the room. Okay. So it's almost like this reputation that you create for yourself that is very intentional, but it's not like a lie. It's not made up. It's actually based off of you and who you are, right? Because everyone talks about authenticity these days. And, I think authenticity is like a bit of a buzzword. And really, we shouldn't have to try to be authentic. We should just be being authentic. But really, like, we don't want to try to be someone we're not. So we want to base our brand identity off of like who we actually are. Okay. So we can think of it like as attributes, personality, kind of almost like the way that people kind of like the vibe they get or the feeling that they get when they come into contact with your business. Okay. So I do this exercise often with my Health Coach Accelerator students. Okay. This is my signature program for coaches who want to build a 6-figure business. But I'll ask them, like, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think of me? Right? What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of me? And people will say things like mountains. They'll say fuck, because I swear all the time. They'll say mentor. They'll say coach. They'll say no BS, straight talker, straight shooter, straight to the point, no fluff, right? And that's essentially my brand, right? These are the things of which I am known for. Okay. But that being said, they're not BS. I'm not making these up. They don't come out of nowhere because that's actually how I am in real life, right? You always want to base your brand off of who you actually are as a person. That's really, really important because we don't want to be out there trying to be someone that we're not. We don't want to be faking it. Okay. So if you were to meet me in person, you'd be like, wow, she's really blunt. She doesn't hold back. She says it how it is. She's super honest, right? She's genuine, like all these things. These are aspects of my personality that I've also infused into my brand. So if you were to ask your students or your clients, like, how would you describe me in 3 words? Hopefully what they would say would reflect your personality and who you actually are. Okay. So let's talk about some of the aspects of the brand. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this today just because it's a lot, but I consider branding can be broken down into 5 aspects. Your values, okay, values, voice, okay, personality, okay, archetypes, and archetypes is the one that we're not going to get into because archetypes is pretty complex, okay, and moods. But we're going to talk about 4 of them. So we're going to talk about values, we're going to talk about voice, we're going to talk about personality, and we're going to talk about moods. Okay, so let's start with values. Okay, so hopefully you know what values are, but essentially values are your core values of which these are like your non-negotiables, right? Your core values are your non-negotiables. Okay. And so we really want to think about like, what are your bottom 5 values? Okay. So I usually get people to start off choosing 10 values. And if you just go to Google, you can Google like a list of values. You can find like a website that'll give you a list of like hundreds of values. Go through those and choose 10 and then try to narrow it down to 5. Okay. So as an example, my core values are adventure, right? Adventure, freedom, health and wellness, connection. And what's a 5th? I have a lot. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't write these down. I can't think of them off the top of my head. But it would probably be like nature, right? So adventure, nature, connection. What were the other ones? Oh my gosh. I'm like brain farting, but hopefully you got those, right? So those are my core values. And actually you probably already slightly know this, because if you're following my content, then you've seen this. You've seen that I love to adventure. I love to do sports, right? I like to and ski and do all these things outdoor. I love always going on trips. I like to go to really unique and cool and interesting Airbnbs. I like to go camping. I'm always adventuring, right? So that's one of my core values. And then nature, you notice I'm always out in nature. I love being in the mountains, in the forest, like that sort of thing. You'll notice that connection is really important to me, right? Like you send me a DM, I'm going to send you a very personal DM back. I really want to connect with you. And I'm in like that in my real life too. I want to bridge those connections with friends as well. And then freedom is a big thing. I do speak for things like medical freedom sometimes, and freedom has always been a really top value for me. So you want to figure out what your non-negotiables, because you not only want to infuse, like make your values really clear. And there's a number of ways of which you can do this, right? So for example, the way that I show you that adventure is one of my core values is on my Instagram stories. For example, I'm always sharing like my adventures and my time, right? I always share that with you guys. And and the way that I showcase my value of nature is I take a lot of videos out in nature and I use nature backdrops for a lot of my posts, right? There's always kind of like a nature component to it, right? So you really want to start thinking about like, how can I actually utilize this and bring this into what I do? And I would say a great place to really show your values is in something like stories, right? Whether you're using Instagram stories or Facebook stories or Pinterest, LinkedIn stories. I mean, most social media platforms have stories. And the way that's really easy because it's behind the scenes, right? How do I show health and wellness? Well, I like to show the food that I'm eating. Sometimes I show the supplements that I take, right? So there's a number of ways in which you can do that. Now, the other way that values are really important is it can help you make decisions in your business, right? So you always want to, when you get presented with an opportunity, and the longer you run your business, the more opportunities that are going to present themselves to you. Okay. And when you get presented with an opportunity, you want to ask yourself, like, does this align with my values? Because if it doesn't, then even though it could seem like this really great opportunity, if it's misaligned with your values, it's not the opportunity for you. So as an example, one of my values, this is in my kind of category of 10 values, is minimalism. I'm a minimalist. I don't like fancy, complicated things. So if someone was like, hey, Kendra, do you want to host this like fancy retreat with me in Italy? Well, as cool as that could sound, like, oh, fuck yeah, I'd love to go to Italy. That sounds cool, hosting a retreat. It's not very minimalist, right? And so I would actually say no to that, because I know like it would be a lot of work and it would be a lot of logistics, and it doesn't fit into my core values. Okay. So that is values. The next thing I want to talk about, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm just going to check YouTube. I think we're good for questions on YouTube. Is voice. Okay. So voice is the next thing. And voice is essentially the way in which you talk. So you'll notice for me, I'm a fast talker, I'm kind of a loud talker. I swear a lot. I say certain words all the time. Like I'm always saying, I'm stoked. It's because I live in a ski town. There's kind of like a ski bro vibe going on. So I kind of have that like surfer lingo, right? And so you want to make sure that your voice is coming across as your voice would in the way that you would talk in real person or real life, right? Like this is how I sound in real life. Like there's no disconnect, right? So voice is really important. So it's really good if you can sit down and you can just brainstorm. You're like, what are words that I say all the time? Like, what does my voice actually sound like? And you can actually ask friends and family. Like sometimes if you're like, I have no idea, I never pay attention, like ask friends and family, because they will actually be able to tell you like what your voice actually sounds like. So maybe you're very like calm, methodical, you're a very intentional speaker, right? You talk slow. Maybe you talk very proper. Maybe you're a fast talker like me. Maybe you're very excitable like me, right? So that's how you want to be showing up, and not only in video content or audio content, but also in written content, right? When you're writing posts, you want to make sure that you are writing in a conversational way and you're saying things of which you would say, right? Like don't try to be someone you're not. Okay. An example of this is when when I first started my business, I was really obsessed with appearing professional. I was like, if anyone's going to take me seriously, I need to appear professional. So I talked very properly. I never dropped an F-bomb. I was very proper, but it just felt off. The whole thing felt classy. I'm classy. You know, like I'm crass. I swear. I'm the person who will swear in front of your children. So like, don't bring me in front of your children, right? You know, it's just kind of the way I am. I just don't have awareness for certain things around like the swear words that I say, right? And so I just kind of felt like it was really hard for me to show up on video because I just felt like I was being someone who I wasn't, right? I just like this was not the person I was. And so one day I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to like be myself and show up. And I showed up and I was like swearing and being weird and like super silly and all of that. And I got a lot of hate, right? Because it like people didn't know what was happening. I had essentially offered them one thing and all of a sudden they were getting something else. So people were confused and people didn't like it. And people were like, you shouldn't be swearing. But I was just like, you know what? Like, this is me. If people don't like this about me, it's okay. They need to go follow someone who they connect with. And so, you know, I weeded out a bunch of people who just didn't connect with my true personality, and that was fine. And then, now these days, like, I mean, I still do get people who are like, I'm really offended by your swearing, mostly on YouTube. But for the most part, like people come into my world, they see that I swear, either they like it or they hate it. And if they hate it, they're gone super fast because I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. Okay. So voice is really important, right? You don't want to teach online video or audio or anything like in a voice that isn't yours. Okay. So this is a learned skill. This might feel challenging at first because you're like, well, I don't know, like I don't feel natural when I'm on video. Like it's super weird. And it's definitely 100% something that you can learn. You can go back to my Facebook page because I started doing Facebook Lives. I think the first one I did was in like 2016. And I am not like this. I will tell you that. I think I've actually posted it to my Instagram story before because I was so uncomfortable. I was super awkward. I had like no emotion. I'm like monotone. I'm just like, rah, 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 rah. And it's because it was uncomfortable. And so the first time you do go live on video, it's not going to feel natural, but you know, this is me like I can't do math, like 4 + 2, 6 years later of showing up on live video, like probably once a week, sometimes more. And now it is very natural to me. I can just show up and spitball and talk and like be weird and have fun. Even if people aren't engaging, even if people aren't giving me anything, I can still just be myself. Okay. So that's voice. The next thing is very similar. It's personality. Okay. So again, like what are aspects of your personality? Because you want people to really experience like your personality. So this goes a little bit beyond voice, but like personality might be like, you know, the way that you dress, right? Like you are probably you're never going to find me in like fancy shoes or a dress for the most part. I occasionally put a dress on, but for the most part, I'm in like a nice shirt sometimes I'm in a hoodie. But I'm always in my fucking black Lululemons, right? I don't wear regular pants. That's so uncomfortable. Who does that? Right. So it's like, if you're going to book a photo shoot for yourself, don't put on like this super fancy dress and stilettos unless that's the way that you are in real life. Like I don't get super dressed up for photo shoots. Typically I just wear things that I would normally wear. I wear a lot of denim. I always wear toque, right? If you're American, that is a beanie, okay? But I always wear that because I live in Canada. I live on top of a mountain. We use wood for heating. So in between, like what I'm doing for work, I'm like chopping firewood, right? I'm going outside. I live in Canada, right? So I don't like take off my hat and try to make myself like look fancy. I do photo shoots with my hats on, right? Because that's my style. So personality can come out in like your personal style, the way that you talk, the way that you are, right? We really want to infuse these things into our personal brand, okay? Because you want people to like have this very specific experience when they come into contact with your business. And the other thing that does, and why it's so important, is it creates consistency. Okay. And consistency is like so important. Okay. Because consistency actually builds trust, right? You would probably not want to be friends with someone who was incredibly inconsistent, right? Like they just like never showed up when they said they would. They were different. Like every time you hung out with them, they were like a little bit different. And you were just like, I don't actually know who this person is. So when you show up consistently by just kind of, it creates this, which creates trust, right? And actually the number one reason why people will buy or they won't buy. You could have the best program in the world. Okay. It could be the most valuable, the best price point, but if people don't trust you, they're not going to buy. Okay. Super important. I hope that makes sense. Any questions on Instagram or YouTube? I'm going to have a little bit of smoothie here, and then we're going to talk about the final one, which is moods, which is actually super important. Okay, cool. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is moods. And moods is essentially, so what you've hopefully noticed so far is like everything we're talking about is you. Okay. It's like your personality, your voice, right? Your values. The next thing we really want to think about is them and the mood that they experience when they come into contact with your brand. Okay. So what is that mood? And this truly depends on like what actually is your niche. Okay. Because if you have, for example, if you are someone who is a meditation coach, just as an example. So if you are a meditation coach, what you would want people to feel when they come into contact with your brand is to be calm, to be chill, to be grounded, right? To be connected. So that should be reflected in your brand colors and your fonts, but also in like how you actually show up, right? Because if you help people with anxiety, like meditate, and that's your primary thing, and you're out there like, whoa, like in their face and like talking fast and being crazy, like that's not going to make them feel calm or connected or grounded, right? And it's not to say you can't, if you have like a type A personality, it's not to say you can't do that, but you have to make sure that you're doing things to make them feel. So you have to think about, how do I actually want these people to feel when they come into my business? And you can we can use an example of like a brick and a mortar business, right? I'm trying to think of like a good example. Like, so think of like how you feel when you go into Walmart, right? Versus when you go into, let me think of a good example of like a funky coffee shop, right? Like the mood is different. When you go into Walmart, you're just kind of like, blah, like it's kind of like sterile. It's very bright, white floors, like you're not necessarily like excited about like any of the stuff there. You're literally like, it's function. You're like, I need to get this thing. I'm going to be in and out. So there's like a vibe and a mood involved in that. Versus like going into a really funky coffee shop that has like these really cool plants, and maybe it's like really hipster and kind of hip and trendy. Like that gives you a totally different vibe. You're like, ooh, I kind of feel cool. Like I feel like I got my coffee, my latte, and like, like you want to like take selfies of yourself in it. Like you don't want to take selfies of yourself when you're in Walmart, right? So you really want to think about the way in which you want people to feel when they come into your business. So for example, in my business, I want you to feel fired up. I want you to feel motivated. I want you to feel inspired. I want you to have fun, right? I want you to enjoy yourself. I want you to laugh, right? I love to bring humor into what I do by being weird and, sharing like some comedy stuff, right? Like that's one of my humor is actually one of my values as well. I love to laugh. I think laughter and being weird is super important and we don't do it enough, right? So hopefully for those of you who are hanging out with me live right now, hopefully that's what you're getting. You're like, I kind of feel inspired. I feel a bit fired up. Like, yeah, this is awesome. Or you're laughing or whatever. Like, that is truly what I'm trying. Like it's intentional, right? And I do that with how I show up and the way that I talk and the type of content I share. Okay. So branding is really important because you want people to feel a very specific way. You don't want people to interact with your business and one day feel like kind of like really chill. And then the next day feel like fucking super anxious and fired up. And then the next day, like they kind of feel dark and like, right. Like we want that consistency because that consistency builds trust. And ultimately what branding does is it really helps you communicate your message, but also, it just helps people trust you because you're consistent, because you're always kind of showing up in the same way, right? And that's not to say, like, if I'm having a really hard day, that's not to say I wouldn't show up, but I'm not going to just like, spew my bad mood all over social media and put it on you, right? I'm going to be myself and say something like, yeah, I'm having a hard week this week. This is what I'm doing to kind of get through it, right? So it's just about forming that consistency and giving people a very specific vibe and feel when they come into your business, okay? So we can do that with visual stuff, like colors and fonts and like shapes and websites and that sort of thing. But that is like the lesser important part of it. The other important is this like personality, voice, mood, value thing, okay? And you just want to make that really clear. And if you do have an audience, you can ask them like, well, how would you describe me in one word and see what you get? Because if it's all over the map, then that would tell you that you just haven't created a very unique and sort of repetitive experience. Okay. So keep that in mind, right? But if you're getting the same thing, if people are like, yeah, she's really like kind and humble and down to earth and grounded, and people are kind of describing this kind of picture, it means that you have done a good job with building your brand. So your homework is to figure out your 5 to 10 core values, right? Personality, voice, right? Journal those down, figure out what they are, and then start infusing that into what you do, right? Do a live video, try to be yourself, practice, and then figuring out what are those 4 moods that you want people to feel when they actually come into contact with your brand. Okay. Now, if you enjoyed this video, this is kind of the stuff that we do inside Health Coach Accelerator, which is my 90-day coaching program for health coaches who want to build 6-figure businesses. So within this program, we build your 6-figure framework. Essentially, I teach you how to get to 10K per month using organic marketing strategies, which just means free marketing strategies. There's no paid advertisement involved in how I teach people. There's no fancy website. You can do it all without paid ads, all without a fancy website. Okay. So what we do is we build your high ticket program, and then I teach you how to market it. Our students have fantastic results. The ones who are committed, right? We have people hitting 6 figures within about 6 to 12 months of signing up. Okay. So if you're interested in working with me inside Health Coach Accelerator or just want to learn more, okay, and you're a coach in the health and wellness space, so that would mean like health coach, wellness coach, fitness coach, even like spiritual coach, mindset coach, anyone kind of in health and wellness / personal development, I have a free training. It's called the Build Method Unleash. Build has 2 B's, and you will find the link in my bio. And in that webinar, you will get my entire framework that I teach inside Health Coach Accelerator with some very targeted action steps. Plus, at the end, I will talk a little bit more about Health Coach Accelerator and give you all the info. You're also free to shoot me a DM if you want to ask me any questions about it or any questions related to what we talked about today in this webinar. If you're on YouTube, just shoot me a comment because you can't DM me on YouTube. So just comment and I'll make sure that the link for the training is below this video. All right, my friends, I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll be going live again next Thursday at, I believe, 11 a.m. Pacific. All right, bye-bye.